Hello everyone, welcome to United States History to 1877. This is Chapter 4, Colonial Society. In this chapter, what we will learn is that the American colonies grew and developed away from their British roots. Slavery became even more central to the economy, but anti-slavery feelings began to appear. Ideas of political, religious, and individual freedom became popular during the Enlightenment. And war with France makes self-reliance more popular in the American colonies. As we progress through this presentation, remember to pause frequently to take notes in your notes organizer. You'll find the notes organizer located in the text and reading guide for this chapter. In Chapter 4, we learn how American culture began to develop differently from Great Britain. Immigrants and Native Americans added to the diversity in the colonies. The North American colonies were part of a three-legged system of trade called triangular trade. Guns from Europe were sent to Africa to purchase slaves. Then, the slaves were sent to the New World and used to harvest sugar and tobacco, which was then sent to Europe for processing and sale. Under the Navigation Acts, trade in the British colonies was strictly controlled. This led to piracy and smuggling. Bribery was also very common. The British government attempted to control not only trade, but taxation upon the products that were imported into their colonies. They passed a series of taxation laws to collect money to support the defense and maintenance of the British colonies in the New World. Among these were the Sugar Act, the Stamp Act, and the Townshend Acts. If you haven't done so already, let's take a moment now to pause the presentation and take notes in your notes organizer. You'll find this located in the text and reading guide for this chapter. The American colonists responded by refusing to pay taxes on imported goods, a growing sign of independence and separation from Great Britain. The growth of American cities over time was another cause of separation and independence from Great Britain. Philadelphia had grown to have over 40,000 occupants. New York had over 25,000 people, and Boston had over 16,000 people living there. Many of the people living in these American cities had never been to England and didn't consider themselves British, but more American. Let's take another minute now to pause the video so you can take some notes in your notes organizer. Use the left-hand side to record any ideas, vocabulary, events, or names, and on the right-hand side, take an additional moment to record any reactions, questions, or thoughts that you might have. Slavery continued to be a central foundation for the American economy, and over time, the laws were written to make slavery more and more a part of the legal code as well. These were known as slave codes. Under the slave codes, it was considered legal to kill a rebellious slave. Slaves could also legally be beaten, branded, and mutilated by their owners. Slaves did not accept their bad treatment, and rebellions were common. One of the earliest rebellions was the Stono Rebellion. Slaves fought against their masters, burning plantations and killing over 20 whites as they tried to flee to Spanish Florida. The slaves were captured and most executed. American Quakers were a religious group that represent the first anti-slavery voice to organize against slavery. Slavery was used as far north as New York City, but very little in New England. Nevertheless, trade meant that all colonies benefited from the production of slaves in the economy. As we are about to address a new topic in the lecture, we're going to pause once more for notes in your notes organizer. Take a minute now to record what we've talked about in the previous few slides. American society was less tightly controlled than European society. The lack of American political parties led to a more open and tolerant environment. Americans also accepted the Enlightenment idea of a social contract between the people and the government. Colonists believed in the idea of equality before the law, opposing special treatment for any person or group. For women, African Americans, and Native Americans, however, equality was not extended under the social contract at the time. Families in colonial America were larger than in Europe, and women were given great respect for bearing 10 or more children on average. Having children became a symbol of patriotism after the American Revolution, known as Republican motherhood. Newspapers carried debates on ideas popular at the time. Questions of free speech and religion were popular topics. The popularity and force of religion was also growing at the time, with popular new preachers like George Whitefield, who, like many during this Great Awakening, encouraged a new birth of religious belief. War between France and England was commonplace during this century. In the North American colonies, French towns and British villages were often neighbors. Tensions boiled over in 1754 when a young British officer, George Washington, led a raid into French territory that sparked the 7 Years' War. In North America, the 7 Years' War was known as the French and Indian War. It ended with the British receiving much of France's North American territory. And with the French gone, Native Americans felt more danger from American colonists whenever they moved into their territory. The French had been peaceful, but the British sought control. Pontiac, a Native American chief, led an armed struggle against the British, known as Pontiac's Rebellion. He attacked British forts, killed soldiers and settlers. The British issued the Proclamation of 1763 to limit colonists from going into Native American land. The war made colonists realize their need for self-defense. Benjamin Franklin proposed the Albany Plan of Union, a system where smaller colonies would cooperate with each other for self-defense. The plan would ultimately grow into what we know today to be the American system of government called federalism, where states cooperate in a federal system. The 7 Years' War, also known as the French and Indian War, was incredibly expensive. To pay for it, British Parliament started taxing the colonists like never before. Taxes were introduced on tea, paper, molasses, and stamps for every type of document. To enforce the unpopular taxes, Great Britain increased restrictions on civil liberties and trade, limited jury trials, and conducted unlawful searches. Americans realized at the same time that they were not equal to their British brothers and resented the difference. They began to see the differences as a reason for separation. Revolution was in the air. In this presentation, we learned that the American colonies grew and developed away from their British roots over time. Slavery became even more central to the economy, and anti-slavery feelings began to appear. Ideas of political, religious, and individual freedom became popular during the Enlightenment, and war with France made self-reliance more popular. This has been United States History to 1877, Chapter 4, Colonial Society, created with work from the American YOP, an open-source U.S. history textbook by Stanford University, edited by Joseph Locke and Ben Wright, and presented by myself, Tyler Rust. You can get more materials and articles about history on my website, historydojo.blog.